Hello, everyone. Welcome to night 12, which should be night 13 of the Orphan Tales live reading. I am very sorry about last night. It was beyond my control. We were hit with a ridiculous mid-April snowstorm here, as if we're not dealing with enough crap in Maine. We got several inches of snow dumped on us last night, which melted today. So what was even the point? What was the point of any of that? I ask you, Lords of Weather, except to keep me from streaming last night because there were no lights. It was quite a time. So thank you for coming back tonight. I will try not to miss any more nights. I know I said every night, but I cannot control the electricity. So here I come to you today to illustrate the dichotomy of man. Did I brush my hair today? No, I did not. Did I then, with my unbrushed hair, put on a full face of makeup to stream for you? Yes, I did. So it's effort, not effort, effort, not effort, effort, not effort. It's a whole thing. I don't know what to tell you. I am both a mess and not a mess, and that is just how I live my life. Somebody said my lipstick looked good on the last stream. It's the same lipstick because all you have to do is tell me one thing looks good once and I will never stop doing it because I have deep insecurities. I don't know what it is. It's some old ass Estee Lauder lipstick, some grandma business, so who can tell? As usual, the music we're listening to is S.J. Tucker, the wonderful singer-songwriter who has done 4 albums based on my books, 2 of which were based on each volume of the Orphan's Tales. You can find her at sjtucker.com. This is Girl in the Garden from For the Girl in the Garden. And you can find her at Bandcamp under the same name. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Nice to see you all again. Let's do the housekeeping. You all know how this song goes at this point. This is not an audiobook. I do not have the rights to create an audiobook of The Orphan's Tales, so it is emphatically not an audiobook. This is a play. You can catch up with previous chapters if you've missed them at the archive on my YouTube channel, which is Cat Valenti Live. You can subscribe to my Patreon and help me keep the lights on at my house. Which is Cat Valenti as well. And believe it or not, I am also Cat Valenti at Twitter. There's a tip jar on my Instagram profile and also on my website at catherinemvalenti.com. You are absolutely in no way required. These are free readings. But if you wanted to toss a coin to your witch, it would be deeply appreciated, obviously. Everything's brutal and terrible right now, so anything that you could contribute, it is quite a lot of work to put these readings together every night, is deeply appreciated. Thank you so much to Larissa, Gemma, or Gemma, I never know which it is. It's like Gillian or Gillian, you never know, and Agnes for tipping me the other night. Oh my god, you guys are amazing. Thank you so much. I cannot express how much it means to be supported by people who care about my work. So thank you, Larissa, Gemma, and Agnes. You guys are amazing. Okay, let's get started. Oh, I almost did the let's get ready to rumble thing, but I realized that would be extremely loud. This is not a let's get ready to rumble book. It's more of like, let's get ready to whisper softly and say our feelings out loud. And that is not what the World Wrestling Federation is all about. All right, let's shake a leg, shake a magical leg in the tower. Visions of shorn skins and beast maids milling in his mind like harem girls. The boy left the cedar grove, and the girl, who now slept on a bed of pine needles, exhausted by the telling of her own story. He thought he could see the bright, pale eyes of wild birds in the branches, like pearls strung on threads of darkness, waiting for him to leave so they could tend to her. As he stole back into the palace without a sound, he was quite confident he had acquitted himself perfectly. Even the prince could not have been so stealthy. But as he shut the door to his own bedchamber, the brazier flared, flooding the room with amber light like a fruit dashed against the wall. Dinarzade sat among the furs of his bed, a long, slender stalk of straw in her hand. She held it aloft, still smoldering over the torch. "Well," she chuckled, "you can't blame me. I gave you fair warning." She moved then, quick as a fly-bound spider, snatching him by the forearm and dragging him up a long staircase. Without another word, she flung him into the small tower room and turned the key in the great lock. The room was bare, save for a tiny bed and wind-washed flagstones, illumined by the sapphire-ringed fingers of dawn, which pried at the window. The boy yelped in frustration and kicked the meager bed. He let a few furious tears fall like blows onto the cold floor. All was truly lost now. There were not even linens on the bed with which to fashion a rope. He was a stupid child, after all, stuck in a tower like the deformed maiden, when he should be roaming the marshes like the prince. It was all wrong, upside down, unnatural. The boy punched the stone wall in mute anger and instantly regretted it, rubbing his bruised knuckles as his eyes watered in pain. Outside the tower keep, Dinarzade closed her almond eyes and took a deep, jagged breath, harsh as a sword drawn across a thick chain. She knew she would be punished terribly for letting him sneak out in the night. Her welts had not yet healed from the last time a child escaped from her nursery. But she was the Sultan's daughter, and no Amira of her standing would let terror or wounds show to anyone. She banished her tears as she strode down the polished steps, the key tucked into her robes. But when she crawled into her own bed, she began to weep silently under the wolf pelts, her tears wetting the down pillow like rain on the snow. She wished for nothing but to sleep past her punishments and wake to the palace with no children to look after, no whips tipped in lead, no prized brothers to mock and loathe her. When the girl woke and the great wings had moved from her pale body, she saw the dark-haired boy had gone. She let hot, secret tears fall into the black earth. The night was full of weeping. Dinarzade brought the boy supper in the tower the next evening, just as Rose and Flame were beginning to divide the sky between them. She said nothing, punctuating her exit with the slow rolling of the iron key in the lock. The boy did not eat at all, though he was hungry. He set aside some of the dense sweet bread and onions, saving the apples like gold ornaments in useless hope. The boy leaned against the tower wall, seething. He tried to reconstruct the story in his mind, but kept getting it confused, bleeding into itself like watercolors. Ares seemed to have the girl's strange eyes, and he could not even recall something so simple as the color of beast. Standing on his toes, he stretched to reach the windowsill and peer into the garden below to spy at least the top of the cypress under which the girl might be lying. The trees stood high before him like quill pens in pots, wafting slowly in the night wind. And they were beautiful, because she might be resting under one of them. Except that she was not, for she stood in the manicured grass at the foot of the great grey tower, staring up at the helpless boy with eyes wide and dark as an owl's throat. The girl watched him silently. It was not beyond the realm of possibility that she would climb the craggy stones and ivy to rescue the boy, though she had certainly never heard of such a thing. For a moment she let herself be filled and warmed with knowing that he had looked for her. When it was fully dark, she hooked a toe into one of the cracks between the stones and began to climb. The boy heard her scrabbling up the ivy and nettles that clothed the tower. He was excited to know she drew near, but ashamed that it was again she that had hunted and tracked him. He should have jumped, he decided. A broken leg was not such a tragedy. Of course it did not matter. The girl was here, and that meant she must like him a little. It was not just that she wanted to tell her tales, it must be that she missed him too. This thought rose up in him like a blinding sun. Embarrassed, he snuffed it out, showing her his most welcome yet dignified face. But when she pulled herself onto the sill, glistening with sweat, she would not come inside, only perch in the window like a half-tamed parrot. She was afraid of him, perhaps, certainly of getting caught. Up till now he had taken the punishment, but if she were found in the palace, it was very likely she would be killed. his breath caught with the realization, with admiration for her bravery. Once again, she had outdone him. "I know you wanted to hear the rest of the story," she whispered, and somehow he felt ashamed of it for the first time, as though he were taking something precious from her and caring nothing but the gleam of the prize. Nevertheless, the girl began to speak again, and her voice filled the room like a copper bell. The boy closed his eyes. The tale of the Prince and the Goose continued. "I was true to my word," said Beast. "After the witch left us in her glen, I brought Maggot into the village of Muron, and arranged to have her hired as a sail-mender on one of the great ships. All told, she has done well enough for herself, considering. Of course, there remained the last leg of the twofold price the witch exacted for my life. You must see now that I am bound by my word of honor to give over the skin. Now my debt is done." The Marsh King spat and snorted a loud "Frumph" from his perch in the air. "I think this is all unpalatable," he accused Beast, with eyes that flashed like eels snapping their tails. "You liked that horrid human. You thought she was beautiful. It's unnatural. I think you loved her. How disgusting. You know the other monsters would never stand for it. The Beast maid is one thing, but a human woman. At any rate, I think you like her better than me. I don't recall you ever giving me your skin, even when I wanted to kill that wretched salamander who annoyed me so last spring." Beast was immediately conciliatory, jostling the Marsh King with his head, which smeared the monarch's wiry beard with thick blood. "Poppet, you know I like you best of all. I chose to be your courtier. I could have chosen anyone. She was nothing, a momentary infatuation. Not even infatuation, an aesthetic admiration, that's all. Don't be angry. You mustn't begrudge her. There's so much trouble ahead." The Marsh King seemed to cheer up slightly, sniffing a little. Suddenly he started and brusquely strode away from the prince. "Well, lad, I suggest you have your prize, and ought, to put it politely, to clear off. Matters of state to attend to, don't you know?" The pair promptly left Leander sitting in the swamp with his breeches soaked through and a skin which, if it had not to begin with, was beginning to smell. By now it was nearing evening, and the prince guiltily decided that since Avend was soon to come to whatever adventure had been stored up for him, he needn't actually return to the tavern to deliver his message. After all, it had probably already occurred, whatever it was. He resolved to send a message boy when all of this was over. This almost quieted his conscience. And so he made his way home, discovering the second truth of quest, which is that, mysteriously enough, the path homeward is a great deal shorter than the path deedward. The sun slips easily through the sky, as if on a golden rail, and the earth seems to positively skip under one's feet. Adventures rarely occur on the home trek, as if fate wills the loyal and successful prince into bed at the end of his duty. It was almost pleasant to walk back to the witch, except that guilt and fear gnawed at his stomach like starved mice. So it was that when the prince returned to the witch's hut, he trembled, but had at least the same heavy boots given to him by the tavern keeper, which had not failed him. It was perhaps an even trade. It was the last night of the full moon. The darkness lay on Knife's little farm like a thick-fingered hand. We have another wonderful illustration here, which I suppose is a one-page spoiler. The milling geese were now quiet, and the plough stood in the half-light of the stars like a skeleton. The door of the hut was ajar, and Leander, the Lucratiskin, tucked neatly away, bent his dark head and crossed the threshold. Knife was not in the vast kitchen, though the hearth still glowered stubbornly, despite having long since been neglected. But behind a second door she lay curled up on a great bed, with the great grey geese surrounding her, fashioning a blanket the color of waves over her gnarled body. Leander knelt quietly at her side and pressed the red bundle into her hand. She turned her head in mid-snore and grimaced. "So you're back," she sighed, propping herself up in her strange feathered bed. The birds rearranged themselves, regarding him with dozens of beady eyes. I suppose that makes you a good prince, as princes go. But you're early. The dark moon rises only an hour before dawn, and it is not yet time to give my girl her second birth. And there is one thing more to tell. She shifted, and the geese moved with her, stretching their long necks to lay their heads on her, to touch her in any way they could. Silver wings like crossed arms covered her chest. I told the first part for myself so that you would know what was. This I tell for you, so that you will know what is to come. The witch's tale continued. The knife cut true, but not deeply. The wizard did not even spare a hand to staunch the blood from his own wound. It was a thin scarlet line under his chin, above the collar's iron rim, but only one line among many on that leather-thick expanse of flesh. In one fluid motion, like the wind moving from one willow to the next, he caught my grandmother's hand, snapping her wrist in his grip, and thrust her own knife into her belly. Grandmother stood still, surprised, looking at the knife's bone handle jutting like a new limb from her body. And then suddenly she choked, and bright blood erupted from her white lips. She collapsed into my arms as the wizard ducked into a small room behind the throne, servants in tow, looking after his shallow wound. And through all this, the king had said nothing nor moved, but watched it with a falcon's curiosity. He did not take his cool eyes off me for a moment. Grandmother lay like a child in my arms. She smiled wanly, and the blood kept pouring out of her, deep, dark blood from the depths of her, thick and black, until it was not. Until it was silver and pale, flowing over my hands, over my lap like a little brook of fresh water. I was soaked in it, and Grandmother reached up, her hand dripping with the stuff, and put her fingers into my mouth so that the light trickled down my throat. It tasted of nothing at all. You see, I can fill you up after all. You are all of us now, all that's left, drenched with blood and light like our long-dead grandmother in that terrible tent. You are strong enough to buy our vengeance from us. With my death, I instruct you. She smiled, just the faintest shadow of a smile, and died, with a noise in her throat like dried beans rattling in a gourd. There was nothing left in her. The blood light had seeped into me, and she was a shell, a whole, empty space. I did not weep. I would not let them see it. I took the knife with its thick bone hilt from her flesh and clutched it tightly in my bloody fist. I looked up at the king and all his jewels. For a moment I could see a shape just behind him, a pair of black eyes glittering amid bristled red fur. It was the fox, and he was laughing. I could never discover what it was they did with my grandmother's body, but it was removed from the hall as though it were kitchen rubbish, a pile of apple cores and pig fat. The stains were scrubbed from the floor when the wizard returned, his throat bandaged. The king had never taken his unblinking eyes from me, and now I stood before him in rags which had once dreamed of being white, covered in the dark glut of her blood, my face streaked with it as though I had painted myself for war or marriage. The wizard pushed back his braided gray hair from his creased high forehead and addressed the king. That leaves only the girl, my lord. I will take her into my tower if I have your leave. But the king raised a silky hand, dismissing the suggestion. I stared hard at him as his eyes ranged over my body, clawing at me, trying to gain entrance. For he had conceived a terrible lust for me in his heart, and I could see it grow like a bristled boar behind his gaze. You have your tower, Omir, and I have mine. His voice was quiet and utterly cold, a foul wind through the feathers of a dead crow. I saw the understanding that I had gripped like a new blade the moment I saw him watching me dawn in the wizard's pale eyes. It was a thick-tongued silence as the three of us thought furiously, each to gain his end. Finally the wizard won through, and spoke in a brisk tone that excluded me as wholly as a doubled fist. "My lord, may I speak to you privately a moment?" The two retreated to the opposite end of the great hall, but the ears of my people are keen, and I heard them as clearly as my own horse snorting in a field of grass. "My king, I have a thought which may achieve all our ends. You want the witch woman. I want whatever power her grandmother might have taught her. Why satisfy only your lust? Why not marry the creature?" The king was silent. One could almost hear the tick of calculation echo in the rafters. "But she is a barbarian," he reasoned. "She's worthy of my use, not my hand." "But lord," the wizard insisted, "to marry her would show the conquered tribes you are to be trusted, that you are a good and just ruler. To win their trust is the only way to quiet the savage bands. Make her queen and they will adore you for it. Even monsters are given fair hand by the new king, they will whisper. And everyone knows those tribe women are fertile as cows. She'll bury you in sons. I only ask humbly, the nights she does not spend with you, give her over to me, so that I may extract what I can from her before she dies, whether from your ministrations or mine. Let me tell you a tale to make clear my meaning." And I think that's where we'll stop, because the next tale is quite long. So we'll pick it up tomorrow night for a very snaky tale. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them at this point. I will give you a chance to type them. I always try to remember to tell you guys to think of questions while I'm reading, and then I always forget because I want to get to the reading. Yeah, so I can tell you that doulios, which is the word that the witch's grandmother uses to describe the wizard, so that actually is Greek for slave, and you may recognize that as the root of the word doula, which is what wealthy white ladies use to give birth. But doula does actually mean female slave. It's not like the greatest word. 18 years later, oh, gross. Do you ever read a line and wish you had written it differently, or read it and feel amazed you were brilliant enough to write such a line? Okay, well, I got it, as I put the book down. I have to tell you guys, like, there are so many times where I read a line and I'm like, Kat, you want to use like one less simile, just like one less, not no similes, just one less. And I know that Kat of that time would be like, fuck you, no, I want to use all the similes. I was so, I believed in myself so hard in a way I think I will never again when I was 22. I just believed everything I was writing was the right thing. I remember that and I envy that. I wish that I had that confidence. Now I don't. I question everything now. But definitely I read some of this and I'm like, oh, come on, man. Like you could tone it down a little bit. But then like I wrote Space Opera and everyone's like, gross, your sentences are too long. So I guess I don't tone it down ever. I just tone it up in different ways. I turn it all the way to 11. Just, I can't stop turning it to 11. There are times where I read a line and I think it's quite good. There are better lines coming in the Orphan's Tales than have passed. Even though, like I told you guys at the last reading, my most quoted line of all time has already passed in the Orphan's Tales. I still don't understand why. I think, frankly, it's a crap line. It's not anything, like, but it is quoted constantly. It is literally, quite literally, not figuratively, emblazoned in gold in other people's products. So, like, I know it's a good line because other people like it. I don't care about it at all. I think I've done oodles better. But, yeah, no, there are some times where I'm like, oh, I did a good job that day, whatever day that was. But often I just want to edit it in my head and, you know, like put all of the 20 years of novel writing experience that I've gotten in the meantime to use on it. But I can't do that. I'm not George Lucas. I won't do that. This book, is exactly the book I wanted to write when I wrote it. I know that that's true. It is the truest thing I've ever said about a book. Every book, when I wrote it, is the exact book I wanted to write. It's the book I meant to write. It is the way I wanted it to be. And it's totally irrelevant that 5, 10, 1, 20 years later, it might not be the book I wanted to write then, because that's what books are. So The Orphan Tales is what it is. Did the Witch and Beast go on more adventures after? Of course they did. But Beast would never tell Marsh King about it because he would be jealous. Any other questions? As I go off on a tangent. I guess I must want to talk to you guys because I missed a night as I'm babbling at the mouth. Yeah, it's, I hope everyone's doing okay where they are. It seems like we're starting to get a handle on it, at least a little bit. Like the curve is, if not flattening, like doing a little better. I know that in Maine, our cases have stopped having the big jumps. Like we go up about the same amount every day and it's a small amount. So that's better than when we were jumping by 100 cases a day. I know that there are a lot of places out there that are getting a lot more than 100 cases a day. And I hope that, but even in New York, it seems like things are, I mean, still terrible, but not as terrible as they could be if we weren't all doing this. That this is all to a point, to a purpose. And for that reason, fuck everyone who's not staying home. If you're watching this somewhere that's not your house, the rest of us are going through a lot of shit so that this can be better. Go home. Oh, date loaves. Oh, that sounds great. Wow, that sounds awesome. Yeah, I have my mother and my brother live in California, so I'm kept. My brother keeps me apprised of the situation in California. He is playing Final Fantasy VII today. I am not because I don't have a PS4. But my brother and I played the original Final Fantasy VII. We would just lock ourselves in his stinky teenage boy room with like flaming hot Cheetos and Jones Soda because we were 90s kids and just play that game until our eyes bled. And I deeply wish I were out in California with my brother eating garbage and playing Final Fantasy VII. But I'm not. I'm here talking to you guys, which is, you know, a fantasy. Not a Final Fantasy, but a fantasy. Yeah, it's tough not being able to, you know, even think about family or Easter or anything like that. I know that probably some of you live closer to your family than I do, and so you're having to stay apart. And I'm very sorry that that's happening. It really sucks. Sometimes it helps just to hear it sucks. It sucks. This sucks. It's terrible. Boo. Boo earns. Well, if there aren't any questions, we'll do our outro housekeeping. This is not an audiobook. This has been a one-woman show. You can subscribe to my Patreon at Kat Valenti. I will have new rewards up tomorrow. You can follow me on Twitter at Kat Valenti. You can find the music we were listening to at the beginning at sjtucker.com and at Bandcamp under the same name. You can catch up in the archive at my YouTube channel, which is Kat Valenti Live. And should you be so moved, you can put something in the tip jar on my Instagram profile or on my website at katherinemvalenti.com. This is all free and it's all for you. But if you wanted to toss a coin to your witch, our month is tight, so it would be deeply appreciated. Anyone who does, I will thank on the next stream. Thank you so much for watching tonight. I will see you tomorrow night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Same fairy tale time, same fairy tale channel. Have a wonderful night. Be warm and cozy. And as connected as you possibly can. Thank you so much, guys. Bye-bye.